For me, Godzilla X Mechagodzilla is the peak of the Godzilla series. I enjoy many films from this franchise that has spanned 60 plus years of history, but I feel like everything was fine-tuned just right for this entry. From having a genuinely solid human story that flows well with the monster side, great action and solid effects that have mostly aged well, and a tremendous score. It's the kind of movie that, for me, really shows the Godzilla franchise at its best. This was the second Godzilla film directed by Masaaki Tezuka after he had previously helmed Godzilla vs. Megaguirus in 2000, and he really upped his game for his second go-around at the franchise. The late Wataru Miyamura, who at this point had written multiple Godzilla films, delivers probably his best script for the series here as well, taking some elements from his past works and greatly improving upon them for this film. In this entry, Godzilla is back again, in a continuity that not only ignores the Godzilla films after the original, but keeps continuity with a bunch of other non-Toho monster and science fiction films, including the original Mothra and War of the Gargantuas. In order to combat the new Godzilla, the Japanese self-defense forces used the bones of the original Godzilla to create a new machine to fight Godzilla. Mechagodzilla, here nicknamed Kiryu, which translates to Metal Dragon in Japanese, is built using the bones of the original Godzilla as a structure and is fitted with all sorts of weapons, including one that can freeze anything to absolute zero. However, things go awry in its debut fight when Kiryu goes wild as it hears Godzilla's roar and destroys a significant portion of the city, causing a lot of damage. Now with the threat of Godzilla returning to Tokyo, Japan must decide if Kiryu is ready to face Godzilla again, in spite of what happened during their first confrontation. This story really feels like a second go-around at the same concepts from Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, which was the first Godzilla film directed by Masaaki Tezuka and also had Wataru Miyamura as a writer. But I don't mind because pretty much everything is improved and streamlined this time around. I generally don't mind a movie being similar to a past entry in the same franchise if one, it's a new continuity, and two, if it actually improved upon the ideas. And I feel this one does both. I can also see shades of the original ideas for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla in 1993 here, and I'm glad to see those ideas are executed well. I really love the human story in this one. It's probably the thing that really makes this my favorite of the series. I do honestly believe most of the human stories in the Godzilla franchise are good, or at least have fun characters that keep you invested in the plot as it unfolds. And I feel this one has one of the very best. Yumiko Seiko's Akane Yashiro is, for me, one of the best characters in the Godzilla series, if not the best. She's initially a Maser tank pilot who encounters Godzilla during his appearance in 1999 and accidentally causes the death of her superior and several others during an encounter with the monster. This incident leads to her being demoted to a library position. After years of continuous training, Akane is given a second chance by Colonel Togashi, who operated the Maser tank with her and is now the leader of the Kiryu squad. Togashi asks her to join the squadron and entrusts her with the task of controlling the mechanized monster. Throughout the film, she suffers a lot, but she overcomes her struggles and you root for her every step of the way. She suffers the trauma of being saddled with the blame of the accidental deaths caused during her first encounter with Godzilla, which is only compounded when she is faced with the younger brother of one of the people who was killed in the conflict, Hayama, played by Yusuke Tomoe. Hayama constantly berates her and makes her feel unwelcomed within the Kiryu squad. But by the end, she's accepted by the team, including Hayama, and in a sort of Ellen Ripley from Aliens-esque fashion, she confronts the embodiment of her trauma head-on in a very satisfying form. She even gets to do so in the mech. One of my all-time favorite scenes in the franchise is when the entire Kiryu squad comes together to show her that she is accepted and she is shown to be genuinely touched by their actions. At this point in the film, she really felt like she doesn't belong with them, nor deserves to be a part of their team because of her past mistakes. But after saving several teammates after the first conflict with Godzilla, one of them tosses one of their own squad hats to her as a sign of acceptance and camaraderie.
Tezuka's original ending for the film would have had Akane die in the final battle against Godzilla after crashing both of them into the ocean, with neither rising from the sea and Sarah looking on. Tezuka kept the rest secret, but he says there still would have been a sense of hope passed on to Sarah. Producer Shogo Tomiyama vetoed this idea in favor of a happier ending because, to quote Masaki Tezuka, Toho doesn't want to kill the heroine of their New Year's movie. While I'm usually against most studio interference, I feel the ending as is works much better than this original idea. Seeing Akane grow from a character who is closed off to the world around her due to the guilt she carries from her past, to a more optimistic and strong person because of the support and positive interactions with people around her, was such a great journey to witness, and by the end her victory in turning away Godzilla feels so fulfilling. I don't think having her die at the end would have made the film significantly worse, but I think the ending as is feels perfect as it ends on a hopeful and optimistic note that feels earned. Not just by Akane herself, but everyone around her, with all the adversities they faced along the way.
The other standout of the cast, I think, is Kana Onodera as Sarah Yuhara, the daughter of the main scientist played by Shin Takuma. A lot of people give grief to seeing child characters in giant monster films, but I would argue Sarah is a great character that makes the film even stronger. She is usually the film's optimistic center, but she has a sadder side to her that I think really strengthens the whole resurrected aspect of Kiryu and really hits home the film's message of every life is worth something and that no life is worthless. Sarah has a sad history but ends up being the one to convince Akane that every life is precious, and in turn Akane validates her beliefs through her actions later on in the film, as she overcomes her personal struggles as well as shows strength in the final battle against Godzilla. Shin Takuma also does a good job as Sarah's father, Dr. Yuhara here. Some may recognize him as Okamura from Godzilla 1984. He comes off as a more comic relief type character, but when the film gets heavy he really shines. The comedic scenes with him are genuinely pretty funny, but I think his best stuff is with the scene where he explains Sarah's tragic past. How his wife was supposed to give birth to Sarah's little sibling, but both sadly passed away in childbirth. I always felt it hits harder in films where the more funny or seemingly lighthearted characters get hit with tragedy, and I feel Godzilla x Mechagodzilla really pulls that off well here. Other standouts I feel are Ko Takasugi as Kiryu squad lead Togashi and Godzilla veteran Akira Nakao as Prime Minister Igarashi. They have a sort of dynamic where one is a younger, ambitious reflection of the other, with Togashi being very headstrong about wanting to bring Kiryu back to the battle in spite of the costly mistake of the first fight with Godzilla. While Igarashi is far more cautious and even contemplates resignation as he was the one who pushed for Kiryu's construction. The scene where the former asks the latter for permission to launch Kiryu into the final battle always gets me every time, with Togashi's look of determination in the face of Japan's brass to get permission from the Prime Minister, and the way the music kicks in when he is ultimately granted permission to launch Kiryu into battle with Godzilla. Also, as a quick aside, I think it's really cool how not only do we get to see Kumi Mizuno return as the initial Prime Minister of Japan, but also her son Junichi has a role as one of the Kiryu squad teammates. Like GMK before it, I think this does a good job of making every character, both large and small, feel important to where at the end when everyone is celebrating and shaking hands, it feels not only earned, but heartwarming. They all feel part of a big effort and all of their struggles in the end feel rewarded. This is a film from 2002, so naturally some of the effects are dated, but for the most part I think it still looks really solid. This is Yuichi Kikuchi's only Godzilla film where he gets to direct the special effects sequences, but he does a great job and I wish he did more work with the franchise. Especially when viewing this on the big screen, a lot of tiny details with the miniatures really pop, like the rain effects and small things like miniature towels on the buildings that add to how awesome it all looks. Even some of the CGI, which is used sparingly here compared to the first three Millennium films, ages rather well. Especially things like those little thrusters that appear at a Kiryu whenever he launches, or some of the effects used on Kiryu in certain sequences. Like the shot where Kiryu is lifted to the final battle looks a bit iffy, but as the sequence goes on, the CGI looks much better, and I think this has aged pretty well overall. The action I feel is stellar, with some really intense fights and set pieces, some of which manage to echo the more lighthearted elements of the Showa era. Like the scene where Kiryu swings Godzilla by his tail in an homage to King Kong vs. Godzilla. There's also several more homages to past Godzilla films, like how Kiryu attacks the same area Mechagodzilla does in Terror of Mechagodzilla. And the shot where Godzilla fights the military as he is in Tokyo Bay feels like a callback to a similar sequence from Godzilla 1984. In spite of the homages, it never feels like it goes too far in a way that it feels like it's leaning too hard on those callbacks. The fighting between the monsters is physical and fast-paced, and probably one of my all-time favorite final fights of the series. For the Godzilla design here, they toned down some of the more extreme aspects of the first Millennium design, but still kept the larger and more jagged spines and the more rough texture of the skin. It retains that classic Godzilla style that many are used to, but has all the great modern qualities of the 2000 design. As great as Godzilla looks here, I feel Kiryu is the standout monster design of the film. He is the perfect blend of the sharper aesthetic of the old Mechagodzilla from the Showa series while blending in new design features. Artist Shinji Nishikawa and suit designer Shinichi Wakasa really created one of the all-time great monsters in the franchise when they brought Kiryu to the big screen. And for me personally, he is my favorite iteration of the character of Mechagodzilla. I also think it's really cool how the whole idea of Kiryu going berserk and destroying the city allows the film to homage those earlier films where Mechagodzilla was portrayed as a villain, while also being an interesting callback to an earlier concept for Mechagodzilla from the 1993 Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla manga, in which there were situations where Mechagodzilla would go berserk and lose control due to having the computer of Mecha King Ghidorah within him, as well as having some interesting parallels to an unused concept from the 1993 Mechagodzilla film wherein Mechagodzilla was an alien life form called Berserk that would assimilate with machinery from Earth and evolve to become a mechanized duplicate of Godzilla. I also feel they imbued a great sense of personality to Kiryu, as he really ties into the central theme of the film, which is that every life is precious and has worth.
Akane views Kiryu as a reflection of herself, both being seen as dangerous and having no value because of their past actions. By the end, however, Akane feels the validation of her self-worth and in turn views Kiryu as not only more than a weapon, but a fellow sentient being. This film never really tells us if Kiryu can sense Akane or what she is saying or if it can acknowledge her on a sentient level, but I feel that element is there, albeit subtly.
Composer Michiru Oshima returns to the franchise and delivers not only another home run, but one that I would consider the best score in the entire Godzilla franchise. For this turn at the series, Toho made use of the Moscow Symphony Orchestra for recording the music of the film, and that really adds a level of power and hugeness to the score that I don't think I felt in a Godzilla soundtrack since Godzilla 1984, which made use of the Tokyo Symphony Orchestra. Every piece is just perfect here. So many amazing tracks like the heroic theme for Kiryu, the soft yet strong theme of Akane, the mobilization themes for the Kiryu squad, the end credits theme. This is just simply an amazing score, and Michiru Oshima 100% needs to come back to the franchise one day. All three scores Oshima did for this series are fantastic, but I think the diverse range of tracks coupled with the boost by the Moscow Symphony Orchestra make Godzilla X Mechagodzilla her very best, and in my opinion, the best soundtrack of the series. While it doesn't have as political or real-world of main themes like GMK or Godzilla 1984, I think the main message Godzilla X Mechagodzilla carries of no life is worthless and every life has some value still resonates strong and overall is well executed within the narrative. There are other themes present within the story, like Kiryu's construction being somewhat allegorical to the idea of Japanese rearmament and the risks that come with that in the film, but the main driving theme concerns the value of life. I'd argue a more universal message like that makes this a really accessible film to audiences of all ages and types, and I think that's a good thing in and of itself. It does a great job of balancing those fun moments, but overall still taking itself and the concepts within the story seriously. For its 20th anniversary, Godzilla X Mechagodzilla was given a wide release in the US for the first time, and it was such an awesome experience to witness. Even though I wish Fathom used a updated subtitle track and especially a better transfer, it was still amazing to see this on the big screen with a decently packed crowd, hearing people cheer with the action, laugh at the comedic moments, and feeling the energy radiating during those intense sequences. It truly brings a whole extra level to the experience of watching the film. Godzilla X Mechagodzilla was one of my childhood favorite Godzilla films growing up. I still remember when this was a new Godzilla movie, seeing that pop up at the Blockbuster shelf and instantly renting it. Though I had really enjoyed the past Millennium films at the time, I think this was the first one that really made an impression on me. It was also the first film I ever owned on DVD. 20 years later, or I guess less so since the discrepancy between the Japan and US release dates, I still feel Godzilla X Mechagodzilla holds up strong, and I think seeing it in a theater only improved my overall opinion on it. It's my personal favorite of the series, and one that I feel excels at balancing a great human cast and story with excellent action and exciting spectacle. Hey, I just want to say thank you for watching this video. I know it's been a long time since I've done any content for this channel, but I feel like I definitely had to do something for the 20th anniversary of what is my favorite Godzilla film. I really wanted to do a video where I just expressed how much I enjoyed this film and the reasons why it still is my favorite entry in the Godzilla series. I hope you enjoyed the video and hopefully maybe even walked away with some extra appreciation for the film that wasn't there before. Thanks again for watching.